Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports, and today we're going to talk about my NBA 2K24 ratings. We're going to give overalls for some of the most important players in the league. We're going to take a look at all 30 NBA teams and break down some of their most important players and where I would rank them in 2K's rating system. Now, my rating system is going to be a little bit more harsh. I don't love to give out a ton of 80 overalls. I don't love to give out a ton of 90 overalls. So because of that, you'll probably see some overalls be a little bit lower than what you would typically expect in an NBA 2K franchise game. And then also, when you look at this one, we're going to include the rookies in there. So a little bit of a disclaimer, there are 3 rookies from this most recent draft class that are going to be 80 overall plus. And then some of the other notable ones will have ratings too. Now, I did not go through every single player for this video, so if there's a player that did not get included in today's video, make sure to leave a comment down below and ask, hey, what do you think this player's overall would be based on your rating system? And I'll give you that information down in the comment section. Without further ado, let's jump into it now with our first team. Our first team is the Philadelphia 76ers, with Joel Embiid being the headliner, the MVP of the NBA, 96 overall, which is a really high rating, of course. And I'm going to give a disclaimer, that is tied for second among all players in terms of overall in my rendition of my 2K24 NBA ratings. James Harden gets an 89. I think 2 of his games against the Boston Celtics in the second round of the playoffs would be perhaps considered 2 of the best games of his playoff career. Now, I know people are going to point to Game 6 and Game 7. Yes, he didn't show up, neither did Joel Embiid. So if you think James Harden needs to be a low overall, then you should probably keep that same energy with Joel Embiid as well. Tyrese Maxey gets an 86 overall for me. I really like Tyrese Maxey. I think he's a good player. Shot above 40% from 3 this past year. Now I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit on people saying he's a superstar. Look, a lot of his stuff comes out of transition, out of advantage situations that are created by one of or both of James Harden and Joel Embiid. So if he was kind of running his own team, I think stuff would be a little bit more challenging for him, and his efficiency would probably dial back a little bit. But Tyrese Maxey still a very, very good player. Tobias Harris receives an 82 overall for me. I think he's an underrated player. People look at the contract and knock him for who he is as a player. I still think he's good. PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, both get 80 overalls for me. Defensively, I think that's a really important thing. What I look at, how much does a guy impact the game on both ends of the floor? And PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, 2 of the better defensive players. Now in 2K, the offensive guys still get a big bump forward. You're looking at inside scoring, mid-range scoring, 3-point shooting, playmaking, ball handling. All of those important ratings kind of go into those things. PJ Tucker doesn't give you a lot of that, but he gives you interior defense, perimeter defense, rebounding, and some of that toughness and physicality that you're looking for. So it's hard to balance those things. You know, of course, the 4 on the top there, Embiid, Harden, Maxey, and Harris, significantly better offensive players than PJ Tucker, but he's a really good defender, as is Melton. And Patrick Beverley, who I do think over the last couple of years has had a little bit of slip up in his play, but he's still a productive player, and I thought really well warranting a 76 overall, which I do believe will be lower than what his actual 2K24 rating will be. But as of right now, that's the rating I felt most comfortable giving him. Let's move on to our next team. Now with the Milwaukee Bucks here, Giannis Antetokounmpo tied with Joel Embiid with that 96 overall rating. I think very well deserved. Arguably one of the best players in the league. Probably a real consideration for him being a top 2 player in the world currently. Drew Holiday, 88 overall. I think that's a more than fair rating for what is arguably one of the best 2-way guards in the NBA. You look at his defensive acumen, that's really what stands out in comparison to some of the other great offensive guards. And kind of in the absence of Chris Middleton this year, and when Giannis was out, Drew Holiday was tasked to do a lot more for Milwaukee and stepped up big time in the absence of those 2 guys at moments this year. Milwaukee, of course, was the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. I think Holiday really warrants that 88 overall. I think he's stepped up as the second best player on Milwaukee. But as you can see here, I'm still very high on the overall quartet that the Milwaukee Bucks have on their roster. Chris Middleton gets an 86 overall. Now, he's been a little up and down. Recent years, I would have given him maybe an 87, 88 overall. His play slipped up a little bit, so I'm pulling that down just a hair, down to 86. I do believe if he's healthy, he's still a very good player, though. And then Brook Lopez, for me, one of the best defensive players in the league, period. I thought he should have been the Defensive Player of the Year for this most recent season. Jaren Jackson Jr. won the award. And there's no knock to Jaren. Jaren's a great defensive player, but Brook Lopez contested over 300 more shots than the next closest in the NBA this past season. I do think he got snubbed. For him, he's not getting snubbed in my ratings here. 85 overall Very good, well-deserved rating for Brook Lopez. And then this is where kind of the roster drops off a little bit for Milwaukee, which is a big contrast from where they were previously. Jay Crowder at a 77 overall. Grayson Allen at a 75. You could also throw in a guy like Malik Beasley, who I don't have on the graphic here, but also another 75 overall-esque player. Marjon Beauchamp, second-year guy for the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm going to give him a 74. Should have maybe given him an 80+, just like how many points he scored the other day in a Pro-Am game. But 74 right now is what I feel comfortable with. Didn't get a ton of run with the Milwaukee Bucks this past year. Didn't play a ton of minutes, so it's hard for me to give him anything higher than a 74 at this current moment. Our next team is the Chicago Bulls, and this team is one that does not inspire a lot of confidence long term. DeMar DeRozan, the best player on the team in my opinion, 88 overall. I think he's one of the top end players in the league. That's kind of what you'll notice in some of these ratings is if I think a player's really, really good, but maybe not that 1A superstar, they're probably going to be somewhere between 87 and 89 overall as it currently sits, which is not a bad thing. Again, like I said, I'm pretty stingy on the 90 overall club. DeRozan, I think a very, very good player. He's been one of the better guards in the league since going to Chicago, and I think he's going to continue to back that up. He is extension eligible as well, which is something worth noting for Chicago. Zach LaVine at an 87. And this is a little bit of history bias here for me. I don't think Zach LaVine's most recent play warrants an 87 overall. For me, I think he would have been a little bit closer to 85, 86-ish. But I am giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here with who he is as a player, who he historically has been, and if he can kind of have a little bit of refinement back to the mean for his game. I do think he just, again, took a small step backward, this past season. But at 87 overall, I still feel like he's one of the better perimeter players in the league. Nikola Vucevic at an 83. The offensive talent's there. If you're looking for a guy who's an efficient post scorer, can step out, knock down the three-point shot, Nikola Vucevic is one of those guys. Now, defensively, there's not a lot that's contributing to the rating. He's a good offensive center. He's not a good defensive center. Then Lonzo Ball, you see the asterisk there on the graphic. I'm not accounting for injuries, pulling down his rating. I'm not sure if Lonzo Ball will ever play another game in the NBA, which is a very sad sight. I really enjoy watching Lonzo. I think Lonzo, had he been healthy, honestly, he probably would have been an 84, 85 overall for me. I kind of put him at a stock 81. I think he's still a good player, but we haven't seen him on the court for a year. Hard to believe that he's going to come back and, first of all, be himself again. But then secondly, I'm not even sure if he's going to come back, period. So that's something that we need to keep our hopes and prayers going for Lonzo Ball. Give your thoughts to him because we want to see him back on the basketball court. He's a good player. Alex Caruso, another guy who defensively, let's give him a lot of love. He's a really, really good defensive player. Now, he stopped shooting the ball last year. He just was not aggressive at all scoring the basketball, which I do think hurts his overall rating here for me. I'm a big Alex Caruso guy. I like him a lot. Patrick Williams, we're all still waiting for him to live up to the potential. To be honest, you look at him, he hasn't been a very good player in his NBA career so far. Does that mean he'll forever not be a good player? No, and I still think there's things he does that are very exciting. For his size, his ability to handle the ball, I think is progressing. I've noticed at moments that it's very intriguing, and there's things he does that I do like. It's just about putting those, puzzle pieces together and building something that's going to be not only sustainable but consistent while it's present as well. So we're hoping to see that from Patrick Williams. It hasn't quite arrived yet. Torrey Craig signing for the Bulls, 74 overall. I don't know if Torrey Craig moves the needle a whole lot for this Bulls roster. Then the Cleveland Cavaliers with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell co-sharing that 89 overall mark. Like I said, I'm stingy on the 90 overall club. I think Garland and Mitchell are both close to that. Garland took a huge step forward again this most recent season. I'm a big believer in Darius Garland. I think he'll be part of that 90 overall club sooner rather than later. Donovan Mitchell, to me, a guy that I think a lot of other people would consider a 90 overall level player. I'm not there as much. I do think there's a lot of great things he does. I've just never really been a huge Donovan Mitchell guy. I do think he's a good player. I just don't think he's a true build-around player, which Cleveland doesn't necessarily need him to be looking at their roster. Evan Mobley might be a little surprising. I have him at an 87 overall. Now, offensively, that rating isn't very warranted, but defensively, you could argue he's one of the better defenders in the entire league, which is why, for me, he's such a good player. He's actually one of the best cutters in the NBA if you look at his field goal percentage off of cuts, according to advanced data and NBA tracking numbers. Evan Mobley, I do think, is a special player. Jared Allen was actually in the top 3 as well when it comes to cutting efficiency and effectiveness. So both Mobley and Allen, great cutters, and part of that is cutting off of Darius Garland. The 3 of them are very, very good. Donovan Mitchell might request a trade at some point within the next 12 months, which I wouldn't rule that out either. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Karis LeVert, Max Strus, George Niang, kind of high mid-70s for me. Not a huge believer in those guys individually. It'll be interesting to see Strus in Cleveland, playing somewhere that isn't Miami, where, I think Miami does a great job getting the most out of certain guys. I think 2 big players to watch for this year are going to be Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, and see how they perform outside of Miami. We'll see. I'm a little bit more hesitant on Strus than others, but I do think he has some important skills that will translate well to Cleveland, specifically his 3-point shooting around that big 4 that they have. And if Strus' shooting translates, then the Cavaliers are going to be nice. They've got a really good quartet of players anyway. I expect the Cavaliers to be a good team, and if you look at their ratings, it pretty much backs it up. 3 near 90 overalls, another guy hovering around that 85 overall mark, and decent depth. That's exactly what you want to be in today's modern NBA. The Cavaliers have built their roster fairly well. The next team, the Boston Celtics, and talk about loaded. 95 overall Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown does creep into my 90 overall threshold at exactly 90 overall, now on the richest contract in NBA history. I know there's a lot of questions about that. Kristaps Porzingis, 88 overall. First look at him in a Boston Celtics uniform on the game NBA 2K. I like Porzingis a lot for the Boston Celtics. I think he perfectly fits the scheme that Joe Mazzulla is trying to run there. This is one of the rare situations in NBA history that the GM and head coach are actually on the same page of what they want to do with the roster. Derek White, probably a little bit surprising to see him as an 85 overall. I think he's one of the better defensive guards in the NBA. His connectivity is very, very strong, and I think his shooting is underrated. He's a good player. Then you look at the depth on this team, specifically in the front court. Robert Williams at an 81, Al Horford at an 80. For me, Al Horford's versatility gives him a little bit of a boost in his overall rating. He's actually a really good connector in terms of swinging the basketball out on the perimeter, and still one of the better versatile defensive big men in the league when it comes to guarding in isolation as a big man. He's actually kind of freakish in that category. Robert Williams, more known for his rim presence and rim protection, both very important things. That's why he gets the nod over Al Horford for me. But it is a testament to how good of a player Al Horford has been in his career and how he's really adjusted his game over time to age gracefully in the league, that he's still nearly the same overall player in my eyes as a guy like Robert Williams, who has really come onto the scene in recent years as a good center in today's NBA. Then I wanted to touch on Jordan Walsh as well, a guy who I do believe in as a rookie. 73 overall here for him. I like him quite a bit. I think the Celtics did a really nice job grabbing him in the second round. I actually wouldn't be shocked to see him playing somewhat meaningful rotation minutes for Boston in the near future. Our next team, the Los Angeles Clippers, Kawhi Leonard at a 95 overall, Paul George kind of in that second tier of stars at 92 overall. Not quite one of the top guys like we see from a Kawhi Leonard, who, yes, Kawhi Leonard probably would have been a 96 or 97 overall if I could count on him being healthy. I can't. His injury rating alone here pulls him down to a 95, unfortunately. Paul George, a guy who I still believe in as one of the better players in today's league, a top 15-ish player when he's out on the court. The surprise one here might be Russell Westbrook, where I have him as an 85 overall. And for me, I think Russell Westbrook has become one of the most slept-on players in the NBA because a lot of people don't fully understand how good of a talent he still is. Yes, I know that there are flaws in his game, but people really point to his tenure with the Los Angeles Lakers and say, look, Russell Westbrook's not good. First of all, that was a terrible fit. Coaches didn't know how to utilize Russell Westbrook alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I understand why. That was a terrible decision by Rob Pelinka in the first place to bring Russell Westbrook into LA. The Clippers here brought him in, salvaged his career a little bit, signed him for a very cheap contract, really good contract for the team, but I don't think that contract is fully indicative of how good Russell Westbrook is. Now, I do think there are flaws when it comes to building rosters around him and trying to fit him in next to other pieces, but that doesn't discredit his individual talent. As a playmaker, as a slasher, he's still one of the better players in the league. I know people are going to point to the turnover rate. Yes, he turns over the ball a lot, but if you play at such a high speed like he does, that's bound to happen. I still think there's a lot of benefits that come from his game, and I think if you put him on a situation where he's the guy again, he would put up like 27, 10, and 10 every single night. And you might say, well, he's not winning 50 games that way. Yeah, but he's still putting up those numbers, and there's only so many guys in the league that can do that. and still positively impact winning, which Westbrook has done throughout his entire career. Still a big believer in his talent. Norm Powell and Ivica Zubac both get 80 overalls from me. Terrence Mann at 79. He's really the key young piece for this team going forward still. Mason Plumlee, 77. And then their first round pick, Kobe Brown, maybe a little low. I have him as a 72. I do think he's an NBA ready player. I think his shooting will get him on the floor for this Clippers team, which is very important. I think that's being underreported on right now. I think Kobe Brown is a player that can play in today's league, but as of right now, I'm a little skeptical still on how many minutes a game he can play, and because of that, I'm giving him a little bit of a lower rating at 72. Our next team, the Memphis Grizzlies, and Ja Morant warrants a 93 overall from me, slightly above Paul George. Of course, he will be serving a suspension to start the NBA 2K24 cycle. Also, let me know down in the comment section if you want more NBA 2K24 content in the future. I'm very excited for that. Then when it comes to Jaren Jackson Jr., 86 overall, again, the defensive side of the floor gives him a big boost here. And then offensively, I think he came into his own this past year. People are probably going to be a little upset that I have Jaren only at an 86. Now, I do think that there are some playoff shortcomings from this grouping that we've seen in the past, which partially impacts my ratings for these guys. And part of it for Jaren Jackson Jr. is I just don't believe he can be a full-time center. He's more of a full-time power forward in my eyes, and because of that, I value him a little bit less than true centers, but he's still a good player. Desmond Bane at 85. One of the better shooters in the NBA. I think people underrate how good of an offensive player he's become. Not just shooting the basketball, but I think his overall growth with the ball in his hands a bit too. Marcus Smart at 83 overall. For him, I think people have overlooked some of the slight regression over the last couple of years for Marcus Smart. He's still a good player, and I think a very impactful player defensively. There's not been a ton of slip-up. Of course, won Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago, albeit I would say not warranted. He still won the award. And then this past year, I think took another step back defensively a little bit, but ultimately Smart's still a good player. 83 overall is more than fair. Steven Adams, Brandon Clark both get 80 overall plus, and then Luke Kennard at 79 overall. I think his shooting is going to be really important for this Grizzlies team this year. The Grizzlies are really deep. There was a lot of other guys I wanted to include on the graphic here, but I don't want to spend 15 minutes on each team. It just would make the video a little too long, I think, for people to fully be able to digest it in one sitting. The Atlanta Hawks now at the next spot here with Trae Young earning a 92 overall. I think Trae Young is an extremely underrated player. I don't think people really fully comprehend kind of the stuff we've seen from Trae Young when it comes to the pure volume that he scores and assists the basketball. Now, there are some flaws to it. He does dribble the air out of the ball a little bit, kind of the Luka Doncic effect as well, but he is super elite as a ball handler, a decision maker, a shooter, a facilitator. And those things are not easy to replicate. They're not easy to find across the entire NBA. Trae Young is a one-of-one type player. And at 92 overall, yes, his defense does bump him down a bit here. He's not in that upper echelon of the 95, 96, 97 overall players. But for me, he's right strongly in that second tier of stars at 92 overall that I feel very good about. DeJounte Murray warrants an 87 overall, like this guy as well. First of all, the Hawks got him on a really good deal for them. 4 years, $120 million. I was just kind of shocked by that, just looking at where the NBA cap is going. That DeJounte Murray contract's going to age very, very well for Atlanta. I like that a lot for them. And then this Hawks team has a lot of depth around those top two guys. DeAndre Hunter at 84 overall, kind of had his best season yet in the pros this past year. Capella and Okongwu both at 82 overall. I think for me, Capella, more of the rim protector and just the overall rebounding that he brings warrants that 82 overall mark. But then Onyeka Okongwu, I think, has a lot of potential to surpass Clint Capella as soon as this season with his defensive versatility, a little bit more switchable out in space. Also, you look at his athleticism, his lob finishing. There's a lot of things Onyeka Okongwu does that I think doesn't get talked enough about in the national media. And I think, for me, I'm a little bit further ahead on him than other people. I just believe in Okongwu's talent. I liked him a lot back when he was at USC. I thought the Hawks getting him in their draft was really, really genius, and I think he's going to continue to grow as a player. And I think by midseason with the roster updates, we could see him being a player potentially in the mid-80s this year. AJ Griffin at 81, I think he was an extremely efficient rookie this past year. People didn't talk enough about that either. Atlanta just doesn't get covered with the amount of volume that they should. This Hawks team is really, really talented. Jalen Johnson at 79, he's got big breakout potential this year too with the absence of John Collins. We'll see if he takes that big step forward. Saddiq Bey at 79 overall, I know that might be a little low to some people. I'm just less of a Saddiq Bey guy than others. And then Kobe Buffkin, their rookie from this year's draft at pick number 15, 76 overall for him. I think he's going to be an impact contributor, and I think he's a really good fit alongside both Trae Young and DeJounte Murray in separate ways, in different ways. And I think because of that, his connectivity, his defensive toughness is going to come in and be a really important piece for Atlanta actually pretty quickly into his career. Now the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler here I have as a 94 overall. Of course, his most recent playoff run does go a long way in kind of bumping up that overall and solidifying who he is as a player. His second run to the finals in the last 4 years for the Miami Heat, and because of that, I think that Jimmy Butler's really helped his stock when it comes to the perception of him nationally. Some big playoff games, of course, do go a long way in kind of building up who you are as a player. And I think he does warrant a mid-90s overall for what he does on both ends of the court. I think his ability to get to 2 feet, plays with a lot of patience. His shot making in tough situations is impressive. And Jimmy Butler, I think an underrated playmaker as well. Bam Adebayo at an 89 overall, a near 90. And I think his defensive versatility is probably the most important thing for me when it comes to his rating. And then on top of that, he's one of the better playmaking centers in the league, and not a lot of people think about Bam Adebayo as a playmaker. Now I know people understand he's mobile and does some stuff with the ball, but his dribble handoff game is arguably the best in the league. Both Adebayo and Sabonis are right there, top 2 in the league in my opinion when it comes to operating out of the dribble handoff, and because of that, that's another niche little thing that Bam does that gives him offensive functionality, and it really gets the most out of the other players on the roster. Then I give Tyler Hero an 84 overall. No, Tyler Hero is not good enough to be the number one option on a team, and no, he's not good enough to be the number one piece in a trade package for Damian Lillard, but he is a good player. 84 overall, very well deserved. Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, I both give 79s. I can already hear people in an outrage in the comment section because of this. Listen, I like Duncan Robinson. I don't think that the Miami Heat beat the Milwaukee Bucks in round 1 of the playoffs without Duncan Robinson. He was super important for them, beating Brook Lopez and the Milwaukee Bucks drop coverage defense, using Bam Adebayo's handoff skills and Duncan Robinson's shot making out of that. Without Duncan, they don't win the first round. I know Caleb Martin was huge against the Celtics. I know Caleb Martin had some awesome playoff moments, but so did Duncan Robinson. If you're going to base everything you believe on Caleb Martin over the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, then you need to do the same thing with Duncan Robinson, who was absolutely on fire. He was a human torch from behind the three-point line. Kevin Love, still a very smart player, led the league in charges taken for non-rookies this past year. We'll talk about Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder a little bit later on. Kyle Lowry gave us 76 overall. Those two guys, aging veterans, probably a bit past their prime now at this point, but still impactful on winning. And then the two young guys that are important to talk about, Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic, I give 74 and 73 overalls. The Charlotte Hornets now, LaMelo Ball, an 88 overall. I think a very good player in the league, and I think somebody who is underrated. He's an elite three-point shooter, and yes, I said elite. I chose that word specifically because he is elite at shooting the basketball. His shot types are very difficult, and he connects on a high percentage of them. It's not really rocket science here. He's just flat out a very, 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 very good shooter. Miles Bridges, we'll see what he looks like. We haven't seen him play basketball in a year. I kind of gave him a generic 84 overall. I didn't feel comfortable with giving him something higher, even though the most recent time we saw him play probably warrant a little bit closer to an 86, 87 overall, although I'm kind of guessing maybe a little bit of rust there. We'll see what he looks like. Brandon Miller, second overall pick, I gave a 79, so no, he is not one of the 3 rookies from this most recent draft class to break the 80 overall barrier. For me, I think he's good. I think there's going to be a lot of things Brandon Miller does very, very well in his career, but I do think, in terms of his overall game right now, there's a lot more stuff to work on than some of the other guys. Mark Williams, 79 overall. I think he's another player like we talked about with Onyeka Okongwu, that by midseason, we could see this guy easily in the 80 overall tier, where he's 80 overall plus, because I think Mark Williams, toward the back end of last season, started to take real strides forward as a center, as a starting caliber center specifically, and I think we can see him probably take strides forward going forward as well. We have PJ Washington, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier. It's an okay grouping. I don't really love this grouping of players. PJ Washington, people are going to say I'm way low on him. I mean, scoring and then scoring while winning is two different things. That's the one thing I'll have to say. Gordon Hayward, past his prime, and obviously the ankle injury kind of shook up his whole career. I would urge you to go watch Utah Jazz Gordon Hayward again, because that guy was special. And then Terry Rozier, I'm just completely out on Terry Rozier. The Utah Jazz now, I have Lauri Markkanen as an 87 overall. And if you would have asked me a year ago what Lauri Markkanen's overall would have been going into the NBA 2K24, I would have probably said like maybe an 80, maybe an 81. And this is a real testament to what Lauri Markkanen has been able to do and in the production that he put up this past year for Utah. 87 overall is nothing to scoff at. That's an elite rating and one of the better players in the league, honestly, with the way that he performed last season. Walker Kessler gets a really high rating at 84 overall. Displayed a lot of great things as a drop coverage big. Now, my question for Walker Kessler is, what areas does he take noticeable steps forward in? Because that's really going to be what defines his career. The stuff he did last year is kind of the stuff we expected to be his floor in the league. Specifically, me on the channel, I looked at him as a really great rebounder, a guy who's going to be an elite drop coverage big at some point of his career. I think he got there a little bit quicker than I was expecting. But still at this point, then it's like, okay, does he take a step forward as a three-point shooter? How does his offensive game evolve? Does he become a better post-up big? What does he really grow as? And I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch for this year. John Collins, Utah did a great job buying him on the low. His contract, it is what it is. It's expensive. But anytime you can bring in talent for basically nothing, you should consider doing that. And Utah got it done. So props to them for that. He's 83 overall. Clarkson, Sexton, 81 and 79 overall, respectively. Clarkson had a really nice year. Maybe I'm a little low on Clarkson. I just think some of the playmaking deficiencies between those two guys is what kind of negates them from getting higher overall ratings for me. Ochai Agbaji, Taylor Hendricks, both at 77. I think Agbaji started to show a lot of nice stuff toward the back end of the season. I think Taylor Hendricks is going to have an awesome rookie year. I really do believe in his talent. And then Keontae George. That guy was lethal during the summer league. Could not miss. People are probably going to be outraged at that 75 overall rating. Listen, there's going to be weeks during the season where he does not miss at all. And then there's going to be weeks during the season where he can't make a shot. That's just how Keontae George is. He's the ultimate heat check player, which is a good thing at times, but it also means that there's going to be some stretches of basketball where he's not great. So Jazz fans, just be ready for that. Brace yourselves for it and enjoy the ride while you have him in his rookie season. The Sacramento Kings next. De'Aaron Fox, welcome to the 90 overall club. And like I said, I'm stingy on that 90 overall mark, but I think De'Aaron Fox really stepped up his play big time as an all-NBA level guard this past year. I mean, just an incredible season. The most clutch player in the league this past year, really kind of was the steering ship of the Sacramento Kings. And, you know, coming off of a year where they traded Tyrese Halliburton, I think there was a lot of scrutiny for Sacramento. And De'Aaron Fox was the guy that had to step up big time, and he did. 90 overall, very well warranted. With the play that we saw not only this past regular season, but in the playoffs, he did not shy away from the moment at all. He was giving the Golden State Warriors a ton of problems. They just ran up a little bit short next to Steph Curry, one of the greatest of all time. But De'Aaron Fox, what a season for him, and I'm hoping to see him not only build on that, but maybe even take a big step forward again off of that. Domantas Sabonis at 86 overall, similar to what we talked about with Bam Adebayo, one of the best dribble handoff players in the league. Now, I think Sabonis is a better post-up player. I think he's a better offensive player than Bam Adebayo, but defensively, there are some real flaws here for me when it comes to what Sabonis gives you. And I think, you know, kind of the way we saw him end the playoffs, he was not his same self, which has kind of been the same problem we've seen from him in Indiana, both in the postseason and in the playing game. So Sabonis has got to figure that out. He's got to take some strides forward going forward, but still an intriguing player nonetheless. Keegan Murray is an 83, Kevin Huerter is an 81, Malik Monk is an 81. I like that trio. Keegan Murray is going to take another few steps forward this next year. Sasha Vezenkov, former EuroLeague MVP, 79 overall for me. I have him above Harrison Barnes. I think very likely we could see him in the starting lineup this next year rather quickly for the Sacramento Kings. If not, he'll come off the bench with Barnes in the starting lineup and still give them a good amount of pop and shooting and just being a good, smart, cerebral player who knows when to cut. I think he's going to be a really great fit into their zoom action and kind of as a corner cutter, beating some of the overplay that we see against the Kings from time to time. So Sabonis, his passing paired with Vezenkov's cutting and shooting, I think is going to be a really intriguing piece for the Kings moving forward. Now with the New York Knicks, I give Jalen Brunson an 88 overall. I think he defined himself as the best player on the New York Knicks this past season, specifically in the postseason where Julius Randle really hasn't been able to shake some of those playoff woes that we talked about with Domantas Sabonis. Brunson, however, is a proven playoff contributor and a proven playoff performer, and because of that, I feel pretty confident giving him an 88 overall. Julius Randle at an 87. That's still a strong rating. That's an all-NBA level rating. If you look at my rating system, 87 is a really, really, really good player. RJ Barrett at 84. And then looking at the Knicks, that's really the strength of their roster. They have a lot of guys who are good contributors, kind of in this 79 to 81 tier, with Hart, Quickly, Dante DiVincenzo, who they just brought in at 79. Mitchell Robinson, I'm a little bit lower on Mitchell Robinson than others. It's just about the consistency. Can he string games together where he does what he's supposed to do, and impact the game in big positive ways? I know he's had awesome moments, and I think if we can just see him kind of prove that consistency, we'll see him get a higher rating in the future years from me. But at 79 overall, it's still a good player. It's still a guy who's a high impact guy. Again, my rating's just a little bit lower than the normal 2K rating system. Quentin Grimes at 79. And then I have Jericho Sims at 75. I wanted to include Jericho Sims on here for one reason only. I played against him in high school. We went to overtime. My team lost, but if Jericho Sims is a 75 in the game, that means I at least deserve like a 27 rating. Can we get me in the game at 27 overall? Let's make it happen, Ronnie 2K. We'll see if I'm in the game next year or not. The Los Angeles Lakers now, LeBron James 94 overall, still in that second tier star rating at this point, close to that tier 1 star, one of the top 10-ish players in the world. Anthony Davis I give a 93, and then Austin Reeves, one of the biggest risers from where my 2K ratings were going into last season, at an 86 overall. Austin Reeves has just every single year gotten better and better. I think his consistency with the basketball has improved immensely. His decision making has gotten a lot stronger, and then most importantly, his shot making has gotten to another level, which really keeps defenders honest. And I think that was the one thing I questioned about him coming out of Oklahoma, was not only was he athletic enough, but was he stable enough of a scorer to be someone you rely on with the ball in his hands in the half court. And the answer to that has become an astounding yes. He's a very, very good player in the NBA, and a guy that a lot of teams would love to get. They got him on a fantastic contract, so a lot of props to the Lakers for that. Jared Vanderbilt, D'Angelo Russell, I both give 80 overalls. I prefer Vando over D'Lo, even though, yes, D'Lo's a much better scorer than Vanderbilt, better offensive player than Vanderbilt in totality. I think Vanderbilt's effort, rebounding, defensive acumen is significantly outweighing what D'Angelo Russell does offensively, and for that reason I prefer Vando, but both of them get an 80 overall here in my 2K24 ratings. Rui Hachimura, people are going to say, whoa, a 78 overall for him, what? Listen, you need to go look at his career, what he's been as a three-point shooter. I know the guy caught fire in the playoffs and he couldn't miss threes that were wide open, and I know we love to praise that for some reason, but look, I need to see it from a 15-game regular season sample size at some point. I haven't yet. We have not seen him be a really good three-point shooter throughout the regular season at any point in his career. That's really what differentiated him from being a bad playoff player to a good playoff player this year for the Lakers. And if you go into next playoffs and rely on that again, I'm not certain that we're going to get that same type of production, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I'll give him a 78 overall for now. Gabe Vincent, 78 overall too. Again, like I talked about with Strus, it'll be interesting to see what Vincent does in a situation that isn't the Miami Heat. Jalen Hood-Schifino, their rookie pick at number 17. I give a 74 overall. Now, my expectation is for the Lakers, he does not get a lot of run this year. I think he'll probably end up playing quite a bit for South Bay instead of Los Angeles, but that's okay. I do think he's a player that if he is up with the Lakers during the season, I do think he can have some positive impact moments. Then we have the Orlando Magic, and people are going to say I'm sleeping here, but I give Paolo and Franz both 85 overalls. I think that there are tangible steps both of those two guys can take moving forward to get into that 87-88 tier threshold. I wouldn't put them there yet. Paulo Banchero still was rather inefficient. That's not a knock on him. Look, he was a rookie, asked to do a lot of stuff. That's not a bad thing. This Magic team has a lot of nice players, though. They've got a lot of guys who are impact contributors. I don't have Joe Ingles on here. I think he was a really great signing for them, though. Markelle Fultz at an 82. Cole Anthony has an 81. Wendell Carter Jr. at an 80. I think the injury stuff pulls him down a little bit for me. Then we have guys like Anthony Black, Jalen Suggs, both at 78 overalls. I'm a big believer in Anthony Black. And then Jet Howard, I give a 76. I think Jet Howard's going to actually have a decent rookie season. We'll see how it kind of plays out for Orlando. He's probably not going to play a ton of minutes, but I do think when he's out there on the floor, he's going to have some positive moments for sure. Then the Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic as a 96 overall, again tied for second in the NBA for my ratings here. I think he's one of the upper echelon superstar players in the league. His creation ability, not only for himself but for others, is nearly unmatched in today's game. And because of that, I think you can look at Doncic as one of the premier players in the entire association. Kyrie Irving, I give an 88 overall to. I do think Kyrie Irving, if you look at just only Instagram clips, you could argue a 90 plus overall. But if you really look at what Kyrie Irving is, by watching full games, you're just going to be left saying, yeah, he's a really, really good player, but he's not one of the top-end superstars, which, again, it's very tough to be that type of guy. So Kyrie Irving at 88 overall, no disrespect there. Grant Williams, I give an 81 overall to. And I think really, if you look at this team right now, the issue with Dallas is who's going to be the third best player on the team? They've got okay depth. They've filled out the roster in a pretty intriguing manner. But this roster it's not thin anymore, but it's lacking like a clear, concise third best player. And I think because of that, there are going to be some flaws along the way for the Dallas Mavericks. I do like Josh Green, though, quite a bit. I think he's going to take some steps forward. Maxi Kleber, I think, is going to be really important for them defensively this year. I would expect him to be a key contributor in some of their better five-man lineups this year. Tim Hardaway Jr., we'll see what he ends up giving them or not. I wouldn't be shocked to see him traded at the deadline. Jaden Hardy, I hope to see him take a step forward this season. Derek Lively, Max Prosper, two guys who in the draft I do think were nice additions for the Mavs team, but I think that, if you're relying on them to give you 25, 30 minutes a night year one, you're probably going to be left a little disappointed, honestly. The Denver Nuggets, or should I say the reigning champion Denver Nuggets, and Nikola Jokic with a little asterisk there by that 97 overall mark. That is the highest rating in the entire game for me. I think Nikola Jokic proved himself to be, at this point, the only guy you consider to be the best player in the league. It was just absolutely unstoppable. Not only during the postseason, but during the regular season as well, for the most part. Just has had a really great string of not only 1 year, but 3 straight years where he's been one of the best players in the association. I think this year really was the culmination of all of his talent coming to fruition in the pursuit of one title. Jamal Murray at 87 overall. And I think one of the more underrated players in the league, Michael Porter Jr. I know people are going to say, well, the guy doesn't pass the ball. They're going to point to all of those things, right? And there's a lot of flaws in Michael Porter Jr.'s game. He's not the most reliable defender. He's not the most reliable hustle guy. Now, I do think he's taken really meaningful strides in both of those areas over the last 2-3 years when he's been healthy. But I think people really underrate him as a shooter. Michael Porter Jr. might be one of the 3 or 4 best shooters in the entire league. He shot over 52% on open threes this past year, and he shoots a really good percentage as well on contested threes. And we know when you watch Michael Porter Jr. play, there's never been a shot he doesn't like, and his efficiency still doesn't really waver. It's a testament to how good of a shooter he is. I think he would immensely improve a bunch of other rosters. And because of that, I think Michael Porter Jr. is a really good player. Aaron Gordon, 84 overall, really the glue guy for this Nuggets team, does a lot of the dirty work defensively for them. He's an astounding cutter and a guy that I think is really the perfect 4 next to Nikola Jokic in today's NBA. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, another glue guy, 82 overall, feels deserved. And now this Nuggets team, I think the most important thing to point out is they're going to be reliant on some of these young guys. Christian Brown at a 78 for me, Peyton Watson at a 75, which I know Nuggets fans are going to say, well, that's way too low for Watson. Listen, he's pretty unproven still at this point. I know that the athleticism there, he's had flashes of brilliance. But for every flash of brilliance, there's been moments where he looks unplayable. So, we need to see him string some stuff together. 75 overall, I feel like, is more than fair. And then 2 more NBA-ready guys in Julian Strawther, Hunter Tyson, who is an absolute sniper from deep. I liked him a lot coming out of Clemson. But I think overall, when they have the pieces that they do in that starting 5, which is still intact, they're going to be a really dangerous team once again. The Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Haliburton gets an 88 overall as well here for me. I think one of those young emerging stars in the league, a guy who, for me, is really the face of the Indiana Pacers and will be for the foreseeable future. I think he's going to go down as one of the best players in Indiana Pacers history. And I love the way that this kid plays the game. Miles Turner, Benedict Mathurin, Buddy Hield, Bruce Brown all receive 81 overalls for me. And kind of like what I talked about with Dallas, I think the issue here with Indiana is who emerges as the second best player on this team. Chances are Benedict Mathurin is the guy who takes the step forward. But the nice thing about it is this team, I think, has better depth than what Dallas has. They've got a lot of really good players. There's, I've been quoted saying there's like 13 or 14 guys on this roster that I actually truly like and truly believe could be good NBA players. And that's a really good thing to have, especially around a facilitator like Tyrese Haliburton. They've got guys who can do it in different ways. Mathurin, a lethal slasher, Hield, a really great three-point shooter, of course. Bruce Brown kind of gives them that secondary playmaker and maybe a short screen and roll guy, which I love to see too. I think that's going to open up some interesting options for Rick Carlisle and the Pacers this year. Obi Toppin's going to make this team really fun in transition. And of course, Jarris Walker is really the one guy to watch on this list as a guy who, if everything goes right in his career, he could be really, really dangerous and really, really good. Maybe the second best player on the team 4 or 5 years from now if his career breaks right. So we'll have to keep our eyes on Jarris Walker. But this Pacers team, really fun team to start a 2K franchise with next season. The Nets now, we move on to here with Mikal Bridges at an 87 overall. We also have Nick Claxton at an 85. And people might be surprised by how close those two are in proximity. Bridges, I think, kind of rose to the occasion after being traded. The offensive game stepped forward big time, but we also did see a little bit of defensive slip up, which didn't get talked about a ton. Now, I still think Bridges is the best player on this team, but Nick Claxton was turning in somewhat of a defensive player of the year candidacy prior to the Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving trades. I think Claxton a really, really good player. A year ago, I picked him as a guy who I thought could be a real big-time breakout player in the league, and I really believe he lived up to my expectations for him. I give Cam Johnson and Ben Simmons an 82 overall each. Now, my assumption here for Ben Simmons is that we get a somewhat healthy Ben Simmons this year, someone who actually plays in hopefully 82 games. Now, it's more likely we see him playing about 50 games. There are flaws here to Ben Simmons, but people have really looked over how good of a transition player he was in his career, how good of a defensive player he was, one of the best defenders in the league when he was at the peak of his powers. And I think, if Simmons gets close to that player again, he's still a really damn good basketball player. Spencer Dinwiddie at 80 overall, his shot making. I think that if they were to look for a trade, Spencer Dinwiddie's a guy who could really help a lot of teams in the league as kind of a six-man player like what we saw a year and a half ago now for the Dallas Mavericks when they made a run to the Western Conference Finals. Dorian Finney-Smith, 78 overall, and it looks like a Mavericks party here with Dennis Smith Jr. now in Brooklyn as well. This was a very underrated signing. Dennis Smith Jr. at 77 overall, something I really, really like for this Brooklyn Nets team. If you look at his defensive numbers, DSJ actually became a really good defensive player this past year in Charlotte. I think, that got overlooked because Charlotte wasn't very good. I think DSJ is a very, very good player on the defensive end of the floor, and I think that's something that's worth noting when he goes to Brooklyn here. Cam Thomas, Dariq Whitehead, people are going to rage about that Cam Thomas rating. The guy's got to defend. 75 overall, yes, he can fill it up, but the team doesn't really win when he fills it up. So there's a little bit of give and take there. I like Cam Thomas, but I think there's notable areas he can get better at, which is important to know. The New Orleans Pelicans give Zion Williamson a 90 overall. When he's on the court, he's one of the better players in the league. Now, he's not on the court very often. Maybe the injury rating should have pulled him out of the 90 overall tier, but I still think he belongs. BI, 87 overall. Really great player. Another guy, when he's healthy and when he's on the court, he's just someone who can dominate a game. CJ McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas, kind of low to mid 80s. That's kind of where I would expect them to be. Trey Murphy at an 81, Herb Jones at an 80. Man, this team is loaded. I love talking about the Pelicans because there's just so much talent, both offensive talent and defensive talent. And I think a guy like Najee Marshall's underrated around the league. Dyson Daniels, I'm underrating him probably. I'm not a big Dyson Daniels guy. Jordan Hawkins, he can really shoot. I think he'll be an important upgrade here for the Pelicans this season. I think he's going to help them quite a bit more than people are currently expecting. Now moving on to the Detroit Pistons, I have Cade Cunningham as an 85 overall. Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren both receive 82 overalls. For me with Cade, I think, realistically, if we saw him healthy, this guy could be a much higher rating as he kind of settles into the league. We just haven't gotten to see him be healthy yet. But I think an 85 overall is very well deserved. Bojan Bogdanovic has an 80. Outside Thompson gets a 78 off of rip. I think he's a good player. Isaiah Stewart gets a 78, another good player. Joe Harris gets a 76. James Wiseman gets a 75. I still think that the athleticism, the inside scoring is there. But defensively, the guy's brutal. So we got to see him take a huge step forward. Marcus Sasser gets a 74. And I have a special inclusion here, Killian Hayes. I included him because I wanted to share that I think he's terrible. Pretty much anytime you see any data saying who are the best shooters and who are some of the worst, least efficient players in the league, Killian Hayes always finds himself at the top of the list when it comes to least efficient. So I give him a 65 overall. I'm being a little bit of a troll here, but if you go back to my 2020 NBA draft takes and when I give the Pistons an F grade for taking Killian Hayes over Tyrese Halliburton, I feel pretty darn good about that. And I think my draft track record suggests that I know more than Troy Weaver when it comes to taking point guards outside of the top pick in the draft. Toronto Raptors, I give Pascal Siakam an 88 overall. He's an All-NBA level player. Very, very good player. OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes both get 84s. Scotty Barnes, listen, the one thing about young players, progression is not linear. Scotty Barnes can still get better. I know his second year in the league wasn't super amazing. I know he didn't seemingly take a ton of steps forward. I still think that he can improve. I still think that there's a lot of room for him to grow as a player. We just haven't seen it quite yet, but I still believe he's going to be a good player in the league. Gary Trent Jr. at an 82, Jakob Poeltl at an 81. Schroeder gets a 79 overall for me. Grady Dick actually gets a pretty good rating coming into the league at 77. Koloko gets a 76. Jalen McDaniels, who I thought was a pretty nice signing for them, gets a 75. This Raptors team still a little thin, but I do think the additions of Grady Dick, Jalen McDaniels were pretty good. I think Dennis Schroeder, getting him was actually not that bad either. When I look at this Raptors team, I think that they're not that much worse than they were a year ago, which is a good thing. Props to them for that. The Houston Rockets, a team that is very polarizing. Now, listen, none of their players got a super high overall rating from me, but I do think this team is going to be significantly better than they were a year ago, and I think a big part of that's going to be Ime Udoka. But for me, I give Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green both 84 overalls. Now, Fred VanVleet, there's a lot of inefficiencies in his game. People love to knock Jalen Green for that. I think Jalen Green, with the right people around him, could become a really dangerous scorer in the league. If you compare his numbers to Devin Booker, through their first 2 years in the league, you would be like unable to tell the two of them apart. They have basically identical numbers. So it's important to note that Jalen Green, we love to judge these guys super early in their careers and say, oh, this guy's not going to get any better, this guy's not good enough, they should trade him, whatever, this, that, and the other thing. Jalen Green's going to be a good player. I still believe in Jalen Green. My eyes did not deceive me when I was evaluating him out of G League Ignite. The guy can fly, the guy can shoot, he's a very talented player. Jabari Smith Jr., I think, is going to take a big step forward this year as well. I give him an 82, as well as Alperen Şengün. Şengün's probably been the best player on the Rockets last year or so. But I really do think that Jabari and Jalen Green, with the right infrastructure, do have a little bit more upside, and they can kind of do some things that I think is going to be really important for the Houston Rockets organization. Dillon Brooks gets an 80 for me. I know people are going to laugh at that and say, whoa, how does he get an 80 overall? He's terrible. Listen, Dillon Brooks is a solid player. Now, does he talk too much? Yes. Does he shoot the ball too much? Yes. But he's an All-NBA defender. That's alone worth an 80 overall in my eyes. Amen Thompson, one of the 3 rookies to get an 80 overall for me. I love this kid. The playmaking is there, the defensive side is there, the athleticism is there, and if, Lord forbid, if this guy ever gets a shot, the league's in trouble. Amen Thompson in a lot of drafts would be the first overall pick. The Rockets got him at 4 this year. I really, really believe that the Rockets did a great job selecting Amen Thompson on draft night. Tari Eason, a guy I like, gets 79. KPJ gets a 78. I'm a little bit lower on him. Don't love his play style, but I do think he has some tangible skills when it comes to shooting the ball that ties him to the Rockets organization for at least the next year or so. Jock Landale gets a 75. I'm a little bit lower on that signing. At least it's non-guaranteed long term. And then Cam Whitmore, as a rookie, gets a 75 as well. Moving on to San Antonio Spurs, and I can already hear people typing. The keyboard warriors are going to go crazy. Victor Wembanyama gets an 87 overall from me. And I feel like that's very deserved. People are going to freak out and say, he hasn't even played an NBA game yet. Yeah, but he's been playing pro games and I've been watching them, okay? I've watched so much Victor Wembanyama. I know this kid inside and out. He's got flaws. He doesn't roll super hard to the rim when he should sometimes. He likes to play in isolation a little bit more than he's currently ready to do. The shot's not fully there yet, but I think he's got the framework to become a good shooter in the NBA. Listen, there's flaws to his game. Look at the defensive side of the court. The guy is 7'5". He's going to be probably one of the top 3 rim protectors in the league as a rookie, and that alone makes him worthy of all-star consideration. And now you also point to the fact that the touches are going to go to Victor. I think he's a better passer than we even saw on film from his days with the Metropolitans 92 and before. I think Victor Wembanyama is just a skillful player, and people are going to be outraged at this 87 overall mark. Listen, he's already the best player on the Spurs. He already is. He's better than Devin Vassell. He's more talented than Devin Vassell, and I'm a big Devin Vassell guy. Victor Wembanyama is elite. You can see all the other ratings. I don't feel like I need to talk about them as much. I need to give justification for Victor Wembanyama, and I'm telling you right now, if teams were trying to win, like, people are going to argue about, oh, well, you don't even know if he's going to be Clint Capella. Listen, for one season, if you're the Atlanta Hawks, would you trade Clint Capella for a guy who is 5-6 inches taller with more touch, can shoot better, and can pass better, and can dribble better? Would you make that trade for one season? Not even a long-term thing, for 1 year. Does it help the Hawks potentially win the finals more likely this year than Clint Capella? The answer to that is yes, and that's why he's worth an 87 overall. The Phoenix Suns, people are going to freak out about this too a little bit. I give Devin Booker a 95. One of the premier players in the league. I give Kevin Durant a 94. That's right. I believe Devin Booker is the best player on the Phoenix Suns. Back-to-back years, we've seen Kevin Durant not really have the playoffs we're kind of accustomed to seeing him have. Of course, 2 years ago, got swept by the Boston Celtics. This most recent season, he was solid. He wasn't bad. He had some really awesome moments. But I think he's struggling with physicality a little bit more than we've ever seen. Bradley Beal gets an 87. I do think he's a really good player. Ayton gets an 85. You look at the top four and say, wow, this team's loaded. Then this is where the fall-off is. There's nearly a 10 overall dip down to Keita Bates-Diop, who I do think Bates-Diop took important strides forward as a play finisher this past year. I think he's a really good transition guy. Defensively, he's going to do some nice stuff for them with his length, size, rebounding. Yuta Watanabe, I think, is an important player. If you were to look at his 2K ratings, he's going to have a high three-pointer because he knocks down a lot of corner threes. The rest of the stuff's not going to be great other than defensive intangibles. And that's really one of the most important things for me is this guy understands how to rotate. He knows how to scramble. He's going to be in the right spot at the right time. And I think that's going to be important for Phoenix this next year. Don't rely on Eric Gordon for a ton. Eric Gordon's old. 75 overall. I considered him being like a 73. I felt like I couldn't do that, but I don't know. This team is still thin. They're still very, very thin. The Oklahoma City Thunder, I give Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a 94, Chet Holmgren an 82, as well as Josh Giddey. Jalen Williams gets an 82. Lou Dort finds himself an 80. If he could ever figure out how to finish around the rim and play off of 2 feet, he'd probably get like an 83, 84 overall just because of how good defensively he is. Isaiah Joe gets a 78. Jalen Williams, the charge taker, gets a 77. Really love Jalen Williams. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if he and Chet Holmgren play together a lot this season or not, if they kind of share the 4-5 combination or if they are kind of exclusive to each other in terms of playing the 5-man spot. Ousmane Dieng, a guy with massive potential. We'll see if he lives up to that this year. And then their rookie, Cason Wallace, I give a 74. The Minnesota Timberwolves, Ant gets an 89, just right at the edge of a 90 overall mark. Now, I think Anthony Edwards going into this year is probably a guy that, hey, my first roster update, I'm probably bumping him up to a 90 or 91. There are some important things I need to see him improve in when it comes to facilitating and just his shot selection in general. There's still some flaws with the way that he plays the game, but I do think the talent is there to be one of the better players in the league, a top 15-ish guy relatively soon. Rudy Gobert, I give an 88. People are going to be outraged at that as well. Listen, Gobert is still one of the best individual defenders. The Minnesota Timberwolves basically put him on an island in a way that has never happened in his career. Big part of why he was not as productive this past year in terms of blocking shots and his rebounding rate was because Minnesota was hanging him out to dry. 2-on-1 situations, a ton at the rim, which there's just not a player in the NBA, maybe other than Victor Wembanyama now, who is going to be able to live and thrive in those situations. Karl-Anthony Towns gets an 87 coming off of injury. We're going to have to see a good year from Cat. Otherwise, he might be playing in a new uniform next season. Jaden McDaniels gets an 85. I'm really high on McDaniels. I think he's going to have a breakout year. I think he would be my pick for most improved player right now going into this next season. I love Jaden McDaniels' game. The seatbelt is one of the best defenders in the league, period. Mike Conley at an 80. Kyle Anderson at 79. Leonard Miller gets a 73. You guys know I love Leonard Miller. I still think there's going to be a lot of time for him to develop. I think he needs to play with the Iowa Wolves a little bit. And we're just not going to really see him on the floor a lot behind, Gobert, Kat, Naz Reid. I know people are going to look at my Naz Reid rating and say, whoa, a 77. Listen, I'm a little bit lower on him. Offensively, he does some nice stuff. I think that there's some real flaws in his game when it comes to rebounding, guarding the interior. Yeah, I don't think Naz Reid's a perfect player. I think there's some flaws. But nonetheless, Leonard Miller's not going to have a lot of opportunities this year with the big league squad for the Timberwolves. The Portland Trailblazers, Damian Lillard, a little asterisk by his name. You guys know why. He won't be on this team probably by the start of the season, whether that's via trade or via the Blazers saying, yeah, no, we don't really want you to show up to training camp. He still gets a 92 overall, though, because this guy can fill it up. He's an elite offensive player. Defensively, leaves a little to be desired, but he's a really, really good offensive player, one of the better players in the league, period. Scoot Henderson gets an 82 overall for me off rip. I think most years he would have been a first overall pick. This year goes third overall because Victor Wembanyama exists and because the Charlotte Hornets and Michael Jordan exists. That's exactly why. Shaedon Sharpe, 82 overall as well. I think both him and Scoot are going to develop so beautifully together. I think the Blazers are going to be a really good team long term. Jeremy Grant on a terrible contract, an 81 overall. Anthony Simons gets a 79. Nurkic on a bad contract gets a 78. Matisse Thybulle, 77. Maybe I'm a little high on that. Maybe he should be a little bit lower. And then Chris Murray gets a 74. If you wanted to see like a Ryan Rupert rating, probably be like 72-ish, 73-ish, kind of in that same ballpark. Also, shout out to the Blazers for having a new G League affiliate as well. Excited for them, and I'm excited to watch them play at some point this season. The Golden State Warriors, the one that maybe a lot of people were waiting for. Steph Curry, 96 overall, tied for second highest rating in the league, as you could tell. I kind of settled on a lot of guys being 96 overalls, and then really Jokic being the one distinguished player at 97. Klay Thompson, Wiggins, and Green all get 85 overalls, all for different reasons. Klay was a little bit closer to his old self, not quite the same player where, back in the day I would have given him a 90 overall, probably, but now I'd say 85-ish is kind of where he belongs. Wiggins at an 85 I think is fair. Draymond Green at an 85 I think is more than fair for some of his deficiencies. There's a lot of proficiencies that make up for that as well. Chris Paul gets an 83. Obviously he's regressed at this point of his career, but he's still a good player. Kevon Looney gets an 80 for his dribble handoff rating. Now, he's not as good of a dribble handoff guy as Bam and Sabonis, but he understands his role and he knows, I probably shouldn't shoot a lot of half-court shots. Jonathan Kuminga gets a 78. I'm really high on the rookies here, though, for Golden State. Trace Jackson-Davis, Brandon Podziemski, both of them get 77 and 76 overall, respectively. Big believer in those two guys. I think they're going to be impact players pretty quickly for Golden State this upcoming season, which leads us into our final team, the Washington Wizards. There's no 85 overall plus player here. Kuzma gets an 84 from me. Jordan Poole gets an 83, although I think Poole and Kuzma are going to put up a lot of numbers this year. I think those two guys are going to have awesome seasons for themselves. If you're playing fantasy basketball, those are two guys to consider. Denny Avdija gets an 80. Corey Kispert gets a 79. I like those two guys. I think they're going to continue to grow and get better over time. Tyus Jones gets a 79. Gafford gets a 78. Bilal Coulibaly gets a 76, as does DeLon Wright. I think DeLon Wright could help a lot of teams. We need to see a DeLon Wright trade because that guy can play. He could help out another team for sure in the league. I'd like to see him in another situation. Coulibaly, I'm very interested to see how his rookie year plays out. Johnny Davis, we'll get to see him play a little bit more with the big league team this year. And then Patrick Baldwin Jr., I am not high on him. If he's not just catching and shooting, I don't think he does a lot for you. But we'll see. Maybe he gets some extended run with the Wizards, and maybe he's advanced his game in the last year or so. And I'm hoping that's the case because I would love to see PBJ have a nice career and really figure some things out. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you go check out some of the other videos on the channel. The most recent video is one that I definitely suggest checking out. That's my NBA tiers, where I suspect some of these teams to finish. And then also make sure you go check out my suggestion video as well. Make sure to go hit that one up. Subscribe for more videos as well in the future. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.